The retort takes about 2.5 hours to complete a cremation cycle. I know because running it was my entire job. At 2 a.m. I stepped out to do the parking lot check. 15 minutes, maybe 20. When I came back, the cycle counter read one higher than when I left. The machine was warm. The paperwork tray had a completed intake form on top, filled out in handwriting that wasn't mine and wasn't my supervisor's. I checked the cold room log to see which case had been processed. That's the part one still can't explain. The log said we were holding 4. All 4 were still there. If stories like this keep you up at night, subscribe. Now, back to the night shift. I should back up, because none of that will make sense unless you understand how the job worked. 2 years ago, I got laid off from the machine shop, where I'd worked since I was 19. 8 months of applications later, the only place that called back was Dalton and Sons, a funeral home and crematorium on the edge of town. They needed an overnight technician. Nobody wants that job, which is exactly why they'll hire a guy whose only qualification is that he's careful with machinery. Ray trained me. He was the day operator, 63 years old, 2 years from his pension, and he ran that building like a flight deck. Everything documented. Every case that came in got a steel ID tag that stayed with it through the entire process. Cold room, prep, cremation, processing. The tag goes in the paperwork envelope at the end. Chain of custody, he called it. Families are trusting us with something they can never get back, he told me on my first night. The paperwork is how they know we didn't break that trust. My shift was 10 at night to 6 in the morning. Most nights, I ran 1 cycle, sometimes 2. In between, I did walkthroughs, logged the cold room temperature every 2 hours, and at 2 a.m., I did the parking lot and perimeter check. That one was an insurance requirement. The company wanted a documented exterior inspection every night. It was the only time I left the building. Remember that. It matters. The night the counter jumped, I did what anyone would do. I assumed the machine glitched. Retorts run on a control unit, and control units fail. I wrote down the numbers, planned to mention it to Ray, and then I looked at the intake form sitting in the tray. Our forms are printed in-house. This one was ours, same layout, same paper, but it was filled out in a tight, slanted cursive, the kind you see on old documents. Case name, Eleanor March. No case number. No tag number. And the operator box, the box where I sign, had initials in it. Not mine. I checked our ledger going back to when the facility computerized. There has never been a client named Eleanor March. The lot camera is the only camera on the property, no interior cameras, for privacy reasons. I scrubbed the footage from that night twice. Nobody came through the gate. Nobody crossed the lot. The only person on that recording is me, walking the fence line with a flashlight while, apparently, a cremation ran inside the building. Here's the honest part. I didn't tell Ray about the form. I was still on my 90-day probation. Walking into your 3rd week and telling your supervisor that a machine ran itself and produced paperwork from nowhere. That's how you end up back on unemployment. I told him about the counter, nothing else. Ray was pouring coffee when I said it. He stopped, and he stood there with the pot in his hand for longer than felt normal. Then he opened the maintenance log, peeled a pre-printed sticker off a pad, a sticker that said maintenance cycle, an O case, and pressed it next to my entry. Log it like that, he said, if it happens again. The pad was half used. Whatever this was, it had been happening since long before me. For 2 weeks, nothing. I started sleeping normally again. I'd halfway convinced myself the form was a prank left by the last technician, some guy with old-fashioned handwriting and a strange sense of humor, and the counter thing was electrical. 2 separate events. Coincidence. Then, on a Tuesday, I came back from the lot check and heard the ash processor running. The processor is a separate machine. It reduces what comes out of the retort so it can be returned to the family. It does not have a timer. Someone has to load it, run it, and unload it. I stood in the doorway of the processing room and watched it finish its run with nobody standing at it. And when it stopped, the room went so quiet I could hear the cold room compressor through 2 walls. On the shelf beside it sat a container. Labeled, sealed, filled out. Eleanor March. The processing paperwork was in the tray beneath it, complete, every line, in that same slanted cursive. And in the operator box, this time, were my initials. I did not write them, but I'd recognize my own initials anywhere, and that's what they were. Whatever was finishing my shift had stopped signing its own name. It had started signing mine. I weighed the container because I couldn't think of anything else to do. For pounds, 6 ounces. consistent with an adult. I did not open it. I checked the cold room. 4 cases, 4 tags, all accounted for. Whoever Eleanor March was, she had never been in our cold room. But something of her was on that shelf. That was the week Ray told me the state inspection was coming. Every crematory in the state gets audited. Cycle counts on the machine have to reconcile against death certificates and cremation authorizations. Ours didn't. Ours was off by dozens. Years of maintenance stickers covering cycles with no cases attached. Ray sat me down with the logbooks and a pen and asked me to help him backdate service records. Falsifying them, to be plain about it. He wasn't casual about it. His hands weren't steady. I asked him who Eleanor March was. He put the pen down. Where did you hear that name? I told him everything. The form, the container, the initials. He listened the way you'd listen to a diagnosis. Then he said, "There's a shelf in the basement archive. What shows up, we put there. We don't add to it, we don't take from it, and we don't talk about it, because the day we put it in writing, this place gets shut down, and every family we ever served gets a phone call asking if they trust what's in the urn on their mantle." I went down to the archive that night. Back corner, behind the record boxes. A wooden shelf, and on it, containers. Rows of them. Different label styles, different decades of dust. The oldest one was hand-lettered and dated 1961. None of the names appeared anywhere in our records. I counted 31. So that was my choice. Report it. End Ray 2 years short of his pension. End my job. End the business. And try to explain a shelf of remains from cremations no living person performed. Or pick up the pen. I picked up the pen. I've had a year to dress that up as protecting Ray, and some of it was. But mostly I needed the job, and mostly nobody would have believed me. And I want to be honest about both of those things because I signed my name to records I knew were false, and that doesn't wash off. But I decided that if I was going to lie for this thing, I was at least going to see it. The next night, I broke the only rule the job really had. At 2 a.m., I didn't do the lot check. I logged it, falsely, which by then was apparently something I did. Killed the breaker that feeds the retorts burner, and sat in the office with the lights off and the door cracked, facing the prep room hallway. At 2:09, the work started. Not footsteps. Work. Gurney wheels on sealed concrete, rolling from the direction of the cold room. The prep room tap running, then shutting off. The instrument drawer. The steel table. Every sound in the exact order I'd have made them, at the exact pace of someone who has done this 10,000 times. It sounded like the most ordinary thing in the world, and I have never been so afraid of anything in my life as I was of how ordinary it sounded. It took me 4 minutes to make myself stand up. That's not a guess. I was watching the clock, because looking at the clock was easier than looking at the hallway. The prep room was empty. Clean. The table was wet in streaks, like it had just been wiped down. And through the door beyond it, the retort was up to temperature. The control panel was lit. The breaker, I went back and looked, was still thrown. The machine was running with no power going to it, at 1,650 degrees, and through the sight glass in the loading door I could see that the chamber was not empty. I want to be careful here, because I only looked for a second. There was a form on the hearth. Shrouded, the way we shroud them. Correct, is the word my brain keeps reaching for. Everything about it was procedurally correct. The gate camera would later show, again, that no one had entered the property all night. I did not investigate. I'm not going to pretend I weighed my options, either. I set my clipboard on the desk, walked out to my truck, locked the doors, and watched the building until the sky went gray. The smoke from the stack ran for 2.5 hours. A full cycle. Textbook. Ray found me in the lot at 6. I told him I was done, and he nodded like I'd told him the coffee was ready. "You lasted longer than the last 2, he said. Then, while I was pulling my tags off the keyring, "Did it use your initials?" I said yes. He looked at the building for a while. "It never used mine till my 2nd year, he said. "It learns the operator. I've stopped trying to figure out why." That was 14 months ago. I work days now, at a distribution warehouse, running a shrink-wrap machine that has never once turned itself on. Ray retired in the spring. Dalton and Sons is still open. They passed the inspection, which tells you what my signature was worth. I drive past it sometimes. I don't stop. I kept one thing, a photocopy of that first intake form. Eleanor March, in slanted cursive. Last month, I finally took it to the county library and searched the newspaper archive because I needed her to be a prank. Some retired technician's joke. A name pulled out of the air. She wasn't. Eleanor March, 26 years old, went into the river outside town in October 1977 when the bridge on the county road washed out. For other people were recovered downstream over the following week. She never was. No funeral, no burial, no cremation. There was nothing to cremate. She has no grave anywhere, except, I suppose, a sealed container on a wooden shelf in a basement, 31 containers deep, and started in 1961. Whatever was finishing my shift, it wasn't working from our ledger. It was working from a longer list. And if that shelf means what I think it means, it isn't close to done. If this story kept you watching until the end, subscribe. There's a new one every week. And if you ever drive past a small-town crematorium at 3 in the morning and the stack is running, someone should probably check who's on shift, if anyone is.